So tell us now, you are a space lawyer. You're an expert. Everybody knows that. What is the current state of space law? Is it robust? Is it kind of thin in terms of how much legal information is out there? Where do we stand? I don't think most people really know.
So I do love teaching space law here at the University of Mississippi because I get students after they've gone through their first year of law school. And your first year of law school is a lot about case law and books, and you have regulations and pages of stuff to read. I can fit all of space law onto one slide, essentially. You
Yeah.
know, there is not that much there. In fact, there's very little there, which is good because we don't really know how to how to act in space, what we're doing in space. So we've really just only barely touched all of the activities that we can do in space. And so it's important that we don't have regulations that ban things or bar things which might be helpful to a startup company. So we have basically four widely ratified treaties. The Outer Space Treaty, ratified in 1967, is what we consider to be our Magna Carta of space law. Um, it is guidelines and principles guiding the activities of states in space. So it's very important to recognize right away from the title its guidelines and principles. We do not have any "you shall not" in space, except for one provision in the Outer Space Treaty, which is you shall not place nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction anywhere in space. So other than that, it's sort of guidelines and principles. The Outer Space Treaty says the exploration and use of space is the province of all humankind, and access to everybody shall have access to all areas of all celestial bodies. So it's a very sort of feel good, like, hey, we are all in this together. It is for everyone. We should collaborate in space. I think the word cooperate is in the Outer Space Treaty, which is only 2 pages long. And again, it says, no weapons of mass destruction, no nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, what's left out there, you can put conventional weapons in space. And although uh, people will tell you a lot, oh, the law says you have to, that space must be used exclusively for peaceful purposes. That's not true. That's in the preambular language of the Outer Space Treaty. So again, it's an inspiration. We want space to be peaceful. However, it doesn't say that in the operative provisions. What it says in the operative provisions is that the moon and other celestial bodies shall be used exclusively for peaceful purposes. So again, we have this gap. So space itself, if you're not on a celestial body, you can use conventional weapons if you want. And so that's one of the sort of glaring gaps in the treaty. But otherwise, imagine in 1967, right? Think about what we knew about the universe, what we knew about space activities. There are maybe 4 or 5 satellites in space, right? Maybe a few more. Uh, how could they possibly write a treaty that would cover everything that we're doing? They couldn't even imagine what we're doing. And so this has created even more gaps, and this is worrisome. Um, the Outer Space Treaty is a fantastic document. It doesn't need to be rescinded. It shouldn't be trashed and sent, into the annals of history. That framework is still vital, but it's our responsibility now to fill in those gaps.
Mhm. As you're talking about that, I'm reminded of the Declaration of Independence, which is not really a law. It is really a declaration of principles, and it was followed by constitutional provisions and constitutional law, and of course, a lot of law, which we have today in America. But the Declaration, and as you mentioned, the Magna Carta, which goes back to 1215, is still a vital document. So it sounds like anybody who might want to be a space lawyer would have a lot of work before them. There's a lot of work to do.
Absolutely. And this is one of those really delicate moments in time where we don't want a lot of regulation, but we need some. And so, what's really great about the United States is the way our regulations are promulgated is that the general public, anybody can comment on regulations, right? And so, I should just step back. Going back to the Outer Space Treaty a little bit. Before we talk about U.S. regulations, and I want to talk a little bit more about the gaps and what is actually in the Outer Space Treaty.
Okay.
So we have Article 2 of the Outer Space Treaty, which states that a party to the treaty cannot claim sovereignty or cannot claim territory in space by sovereignty or by any other means. And that is subject to a lot of interpretation. President Obama signed a law in 2015 which says basically telling the world that we interpret that, the Americans, as saying, you don't claim territory, but actually mining from another celestial body and extracting those resources is not claiming territory. And so we interpret Article 2 to permit that. And if you think about it, that's just common sense, right? Because if we're going to go to space, we're not going to take the bricks and mortar with us to build our habitats or whatever. We're going to need to use in situ resources. Article 3 says that international law applies to space. And so, again, it's not a lawless wild, wild west frontier. Although if we think about international law, right, what do we realize? It's very hard to enforce. It's a violation of international law for Russia to invade Ukraine, and what happened. So the space domain is going to be even more difficult because it's very far away. Then we have the disarmament provision, that Article 4, no weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons, and liability provision. If you damage somebody else's property in space, you owe them for that damage. Article 8 says if you launch an object into space, you retain jurisdiction and control over that object. But what's important for investors is Article 6, which states that a national government, a state, is responsible and liable for all of the activities of any of its nationals. So not even just government entities. The United States is responsible for Elon Musk. For everything that Elon Musk does. And that's why we have regulations and very robust regulations, because that's a huge responsibility and potential liability. And so we do have very strict regulations about how you launch, where you can launch, when you can launch, what that launch has to look like, safety provisions, environmental provisions, what are you launching, what's it going to do, and so forth. And that has served the United States well. And also, I think the entities in the United States very well. We're now reaching a time, though, where we have all these regulations about launch. We have regulations about radio frequencies, and we have regulations about remote sensing satellites. But we don't have regulations for space hotels, in-space manufacturing, debris remediation, a lot of new activities that we don't even know which agency they're going to be regulated by at this point. And so this is a real problem for investors because we don't know yet what guardrails are going to be up. And again, though, in the United States, it's not as big an issue because we have this process when we do regulations in the United States where the general public is invited to comment. And so if the FAA or the Department of Commerce is going to issue regulations, anybody in the country can comment on them and be involved in the process of what they're going to look like. So it's a really exciting time because we have all these new things happening, but it's like we're waiting for that shoe to drop. Who's going to regulate it? What's that regulation going to look like? And there are a huge number of us who are just saying, caution, we don't need a lot. We need to trust our commercial sector, and we need to give them the rope they need, and we need to trust that they won't hang themselves with it.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like you're calling for some regulation, but taking great care not to retard innovation, if I'm hearing you right.
Exactly, and think about it. If you are going to mine the lunar surface, and you can't claim territory, you can't claim a piece of the moon for for you. How are you protecting your mining operations? We
Right.
need some clarity about what that's going to look like. What is the United States going to do if another country encroaches on your mining patch? Um, these are questions that investors are going to be very interested in knowing the response to.
Sounds like you're advising both the entrepreneurs and the investors to think seriously about space law if they're not. Uh,
Absolutely. And what's again, what's that we are in the throes of that formation. They will have a say. One thing I always say to people I advise is the FAA and the Department of Commerce are your friends. They have no interest in it's they're not about stop. The FAA is its remit is safety, but you need to find your contacts within those agencies and start talking to them about what you're doing and why it's important and how regulations are going to, which ones you would like to see, which ones maybe you won't. You're not going to get everything you want, right?
right.
But you have a say in the process, and that's really unique.